What is up? We're going to talk some sugar addiction today with my friend Mike Collins. But first, this episode of the podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. Promises is a family of mental health and addiction treatment centers, and they're based out of Nashville, Tennessee. They're ready to help you or your loved ones stay committed and achieve your promise of recovery. Now, there's a lot of programs, a lot of treatment centers, a lot of places you can reach out to for help, but the big question I often get is, man, who do you know who you can trust? Who do you know you're going to get the right information from? And that's where Promises comes in. I've personally worked with some of the team at Promises. They're great people. They care about their people. Many of them have family and friends in recovery themselves. Most importantly, just as important, they also have highly trained staff members throughout a variety of treatment centers. So here's what you can do. If you want to learn more about Promises treatment options, and there's treatment options all over the country. So they have different facilities at different areas that's going to be close to where you're at. Here's what you can do. You can go to promisesbehavioralhealth.com/soberguy. They created a great page for our partnership. So props to the team over there for putting that together. There's some pictures of our family on there. And of course the podcast stuff and Promises Behavioral Health stuff on there too. So be sure to check that out. It's promisesbehavioralhealth.com/soberguy. Or you can just call 888-205-1890. That's 888-205-1890. Tell them you heard about them from that Sober Guy podcast. Shout out to Clean Cause. If you're looking for a good drink, organic, sparkling yerba mate, it's an energy drink rich in minerals, amino acids, naturally occurring caffeine. Here's the best part. The drinks are great. Of course, everybody wants a good drink that's low in sugar, isn't disgusting tasting. It tastes great. But one of the best parts and one of the reasons that we partnered with these guys is because 50% of all Clean Cause drink profits support recovery from alcohol and drug addiction. So they give that money and scholarships back to those who are getting out of treatment, who are looking to get their lives back on track, going to sober living homes, all that good stuff. You can get 20% off your first order by going to www.cleancause.com. That's cleancause.com. Enter the promo code SOBERGUY and check those guys out for sure. All right, let's get this thing rolling today. Lots going on in the country, the world today, but we're going to talk about some sugar addiction. Let's do this thing right.
That Sober Guy podcast contains adult content, merciless truth, and emotional nudity. Listener discretion is advised.
I'm Shane Raymer. You're listening to That Sober Guy podcast, and we help people stay sober. Be sure to check us out at thatsoberguy.com. You can connect with us on Instagram at RealThatSoberGuy and on Twitter at Shane Raymer. Now, many of you who've been listening to the show for a while, you know sugar has been a big issue of my own, as with many of us out there in recovery. Cherry pies, for instance, y'all know the cherry pie joke. Instead of Raymer turning to a bottle of vodka or a bag of dope, he likes to turn to cherry pies. So I know that'll probably come up in today's conversation. But beyond that, we got some great stuff for you. My guest today is Mike Collins. Now, Mike is the founder of SugarAddiction.com and Quit Sugar Summit. He's also the board chairman of the Food Addiction Institute, and he's been completely sugar-free for over 30 years. He's worked closely with others to help cut sugar out of their diets as well. And Mike's also been in recovery from substance use disorder for over 30 years. He's the author of the Last Resort Sugar Detox Guide. Learn how to quickly and easily detox sugar and stop cravings completely. Mike, good to have you on the podcast, man. Appreciate you. I'm really excited to talk about sugar addiction today and learn a little bit from you, man. How's it going?
It's going well, man. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I know you've been doing this good work for a long time. We talked about it earlier, but you were doing sober podcasts before they were cool, man. I love it.
I love that, man. Thank you. I appreciate that. Lots of good shows and content out there for sure. But I love being one of the originals, I guess you could say, man.
Pioneers,
So yeah, I love that. So, man, so how did this kind of start for you? You've been in recovery for over 30 years. You kind of mentioned before we started that sugar followed that immediately, but tell us a little bit about like some of your backstory so we can get to know you a little bit, and then how you went into recovery, and then we'll jump into some of this stuff more particular to sugar.
Yeah, sure. No, I appreciate it. I mean, I think I just grew up as a regular kid, you know. I mean, my mom was my favorite sugar junkie. You know, she didn't drink. My dad drank, but she didn't drink. You know, back then even now, I think, I don't want to get too political, but they called it the good girl's drug. You know, she would drink, you know, the family was all drinkers, and, you know, she would use the sugar. And she had a stash. I knew where it was, and she really genuinely thought sugar was love for everyone. I mean, that's how she grew up, and bacon and all that kind of stuff. And we would literally eat sugar, bread and butter and sugar sandwiches, and we would have Kool-Aid with 3 times the Kool-Aid, 3 times the sugar. And it's just that kind of thing. And there's an awesome video on YouTube. Eric Clapton is talking to Ed Bradley of 60 Minutes. And Ed goes, they're sitting in his $7 million Antigua treatment center, right? And Ed goes, so Eric, this whole addiction thing started with heroin, right? And he goes, no, Ed, it started with sugar. He said, at 5 years old, I was stuffing bread and butter and sugar sandwiches in my face, sugar as much as I could to change my state. And so basically, I didn't realize I was doing it. I don't think anyone does, right? And we'll talk more about that. But fast forward, run into beer and pot and every other kind of drug at 13 or 14. And I got sober at 28. We could talk about that if you want. I know that's one of the focuses of your show. I'll be glad to. But I think your folks will relate in the idea that I turned right back to sugar at that point. I'm a pretty thin guy, and I gained 15 or 20 pounds fast, right? And it's not like, in college, you gain the freshman 15, right? This is people in recovery gain the freshman 50 in the first year. I mean, they gain weight fast, and they gain a lot of it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's in the big book a couple times. They literally substitute sugar for the alcohol and the drugs, right? And everyone knows someone in the food program. Everyone knows someone, in the programs adjacent, if you will, the offshoot programs of, and those programs, 100% abstinence is required for recovery, right? Yeah. And again, we'll talk about that as we go on. But so I kept, I started studying about it. I ran into a book called Sugar Blues, and it's been around. It was published in the 70s and then updated in the 80s. And the guy that wrote it was married to Gloria Swanson, the movie star, right?
Really?
And it was crazy. And they met at a party. He's getting 2 lumps of sugar in his coffee, and she says, "I wouldn't have that stuff in my house, let alone my body." And turns around, it's freaking Gloria Swanson. Anyway, they get married, and she helped him promote it in the 80s, right? So yeah. I read it, and I loved it. There's a great history lesson in it about empty boats leaving England, going to Africa, picking up slaves, going to the Caribbean and America, getting rum and molasses and sugar and everything, and bringing it back, and how they grew an empire bigger than El Chapo ever dreamed of. I mean, it's like, seriously. So anyway, I ended up raising a couple of sugar-free kids. I don't know. My wife was in recovery at the my wife at the time. I'm not married anymore, but she was in recovery, and we were into it, and so they never had sugar in the womb until they were 6 years old. And that was probably one of the best decisions I ever made in my life, literally, I believe. And so I went on to have a regular career, a regular business career, life kind of thing, online selling stuff. And, in the last few years, I decided I wanted to do this the rest of my life. But 10 years ago, I grabbed the domain Sugar Addiction, and I tried to put out information, Shane. I tried to put out information the best that I could, right? And some people would read it, right? And they'd go to some of the books and stuff, and they'd write me, and they got success. But it wasn't until a couple of years ago where I started doing coaching and groups and one-on-one stuff that really the explosion happened.
Got it.
And I found out it's just like any other recovery. And that, I call myself a 12-step whisperer, in that I'm really just translating the anonymous stuff that was worked out in dusty church basements for 40 years in the food programs, and getting it out to the general public, because a lot of people don't want to go to meetings. It's just this way it is. And so, I mean, that's the short version. I mean, I can answer any questions or what have you, but
no, I think that's great, man. I think that's a good way to kind of jump into this. And thank you for sharing a little bit about about your background. I think that it's the sugar in general. It's so accepted. It's so normal. It's in tons of stuff, right? And you kind of brought me back even when I was a kid. I can remember my father coming out in the middle of the night, 2, 3 a.m. And like for me now, I get up at 2, 3 a.m. I grab a drink of water, right? I'm gonna get a drink of water or whatever. This is no shit talking on my dad or whatever, but this is just what he did, man. He would come out and he would open the cupboard, and I remember this shit clear as day, and I'd hear the wrapper opening up, and he'd open up a cupcake, a Hostess cupcake, and then he'd open the fridge after he ate that, and he'd crack a cherry Coke, and he'd drink half of it and put it back in the fridge. And that was a normal, so this is kind of what I'm leaning to. I wanted to ask you about soda. Soda was a very normal thing in my house growing up. So we always had soda in the house, man. Dr. Pepper, Cherry Coke. Is that a big part of where a lot of kids start on, or people in general, is with soda?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's the other gateway drug. I mean, it's the gateway. I believe sugar is the gateway drug, and soda. I mean, I think 50% of the extra sugar calories come from sugar sweetened beverages. You'll like this, is that for the first time in history, 4 medical associations agreed on something. Right? The American American Pediatric Dental Association, American Pediatric Association of Pediatric Physicians, the American Heart Association. I always forget the last one, but they made an announcement through the Robert Wood Johnson Association. It's one of the largest nonprofits in the world, and they said from the womb, from 0 to 5, that children should drink 0, not like a couple or little, some sugar sweetened beverages. Now, they didn't go into other stuff and candy and cake and everything, but as far as beverages, children should drink 0. That was amazing. Just the end of last year that happened. So yeah.
Wow. I still can't get over the fact they actually all agreed on that, but that's amazing.
I mean, it was amazing, really. And they made a joint announcement. It's crazy.
Yeah, all together as one, unified. Love it. So if we talk about sugar as the original gateway drug to other drugs, I'm sure there's a lot of debate about that. I'm sure there's a lot of different opinions. What's your take on the research you've done and your experience?
Wow, thanks. Because this is the golden key to the golden lock right here. Okay, in a lot of recovery, and I don't want to get too far down the line on this, but in the last 5 years, the science around the brain science of dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, even your adrenals, right? Oxytocin, the big granddaddy of them all. Yeah. Is exploded, where we can watch it on MRIs, right? And they've done extensive studies, and that the deep neural pathways that are grooved. I mean, you take a little bit of heroin, you take a little bit of alcohol, you take a little bit of whatever drug, pill, it's a very small amount, and it hits this brain reward system, right? It's in the limbic brain, it's in our old, reptilian brain, and it literally hijacks it. And this is what was going on with your dad. This is what goes on with everyone, because we grow up with this. If you're, worried or sad or secure, in pain, your boyfriend breaks up with you at 15 or whatever, you have this ice cream party. And so we think, worry, ice cream, worry, sugar, pain, sugar, anxiety, fears, and so we equate the two, right? And then we damp it down just a little with the hits of dopamine and serotonin. Heck, the name of the psychoactive drugs are SSRIs, serotonin reuptake, whatever. You know what I mean? It's like they're trying to dial in. Doctors are trying to dial in this formula so that we can manipulate our feelings that way. Well, hell, we've been self-medicating since we were children, right? Yeah. And if you go with anybody in a food program, all you got to do, everybody that's not listening to this is in recovery in some form, maybe, or thinking about it. Go to anybody in the food program and talk to them about their recovery. It doesn't have anything to do, yes, they have to have abstinence, like we have to have abstinence from alcohol and drugs. Yeah. But it has to do with their reordering of their emotions, right? Feeling their feelings again. I mean, it's well known that in alcohol and drugs, that if you started using drugs at 14 or 15, that's when you stop growing emotionally, right? Yeah. Well, the folks in recovery from food or, flour and sugar, they say the exact same thing. It's the exact same recovery, right? And then when they really master that, then they fall to a right-sized body, and they adopt 100% abstinence. So yeah, that's the main thing, really. And it's that brain science that's growing in the substance use disorder world too.
So how serious? I mean, I feel like this is kind of could go any different ways. I guess that's why I'm asking the question, right? Is sugar, like how serious is a sugar addiction, and how do you know if you're addicted to sugar? Is it something, I mean, is it just a constant diet type of thing, or is it just like when you mentioned, like I know stress for me is a big one. If I feel stressed out, you know, I'll turn to some sweets sometimes to make myself feel better. So there's that emotional eating aspect of it.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question. And you know, you remember the comedian Rodney Dangerfield? He gets no respect, right?
Yeah.
Sugar gets no respect as a psychoactive drug. But again, if you just talk with anybody in the food program, they'll tell you the same thing. They'll tell you that they used it just like we used alcohol and drugs, or you know, whatever. But the bottom line is that it's like regular recovery. If you have to ask the question, then you probably have a problem with sugar. I have a quiz on the thing, but if you make your way to sugaraddiction.com, you probably don't need to take the quiz. But here's the thing. If people would just spend 5 minutes in my inbox, 5 minutes on my Facebook Messenger, they would know the pain out there. Because everybody, like when we were first getting sober, right? Everybody thinks that they want to learn to drink normally, right? Or they want, people think that everybody else uses sugar normally. Well, that's just not the case.
Yeah.
They're using the same symptoms of hiding and sneaking and, you know, being ashamed and literally going to 3 different stores on the way home so that the person doesn't think of them as too much of a sugar addict, you know? I mean, I hear these stories all the time, day in and day out. So I'm here to tell you that normal is probably not something you want to be looking for.
Man, that is, so I have a confession to make, Mike. Okay. So when I go in and my wife sends me to the store to get some, some potatoes and maybe some vegetables for dinner to complement the steak or chicken or whatever the hell we're having that night.
Yeah.
I'll go into the store and I'll get the stuff. And then as I'm walking by, there's a Hostess rack right by the checkout, right? And I'll grab that cherry pie or maybe a cupcake or something, and I tuck it under. I got to tuck it under in the bottom of the basket because I don't want anyone to see. And like, you know, I stay pretty fit. You know what I mean? Like I work out, man. I eat somewhat. I eat much better than I did before. I don't eat perfect, but man, I definitely eat a lot better. But there's still that little part that needs that fix or whatever of the sugar rush or the taste of it or whatever it is. Like, how do we get rid of that, or how do we start to even tackle that? I mean, I would imagine it's very similar to, 12-step program that a lot of us work, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's good. You're not alone, put it that way. Basically, folks are, at this juncture, when we get to be this age, we are basically just fighting off withdrawals. That's the bottom line. When we get to be an adult, we are now in a place where most people, and I don't know the numbers, but it's in excess of 90%, probably closer to 100, of adults in the developed world have not gone more than a day or two without some form of sugar.
Yeah.
And so when you consciously start to journal it, make a decision, and go into abstinence from sugar and flour, you go into withdrawals, and the withdrawals are real. And if you add caffeine to it, forget about it. In the third or fourth day, you're going to be incapacitated.
Yeah.
You're going to be weepy, emotional. You're going to have anxiety, depression. That's not a mental issue. It's a physical depression because you're stopped pumping the dopamine and serotonin and everything manually, and they call it literally down-regulated. They thin out. You have less dopamine receptors if you abuse sugar and alcohol, but you have less dopamine receptors. So they begin a process of healing. And in the first 10 days or 20 days, it's a nightmare. And these are people, I'm going to tell you something that happened to me, Shane, that'll blow your mind. My parents were still alive 2 or 3 years ago, and I had not gone public with my substance use disorder. I was anonymous, okay?
Yeah.
And then I don't know why, I don't know, whatever. But anyway, I decided that's enough. I joined kind of more of the advocacy movement. And so when I went public, I had this flood of people into my sugar addiction coaching groups and all that kind of stuff, who were recovering addicts, recovering alcoholics, recovering drug addicts, 5, 10, 15, 20 years sober, had been to a bunch of food group meetings too. They tried forever and they could not put down the sugar, right? To a man, to a woman, every single one that has now gotten off the sugar said it was harder to get off the sugar than it was to get off the drugs and the alcohol.
Wow.
Now that could be like a muscle memory thing. I don't know, but that's what they said. And I believe it has to do with the socialization, right? It has to do with the, it's just everywhere, everything and every celebration. And our culture now just adopts it as anything, everything, even just a regular night out includes dessert, you know?
Yeah.
So it's been it's a tectonic shift that's happening, just like the recovery advocacy movement and the reduction of stigma is. This is one that we're a few years into that. Yeah. This is brand new. It's like condoms in bathrooms, drinking and driving, seatbelts in cars, smoking in public. It's going to take time for the science to get out there and and for the people who have recovery to get. All right, I'm on my soapbox, but
you're good. I love it, and it makes a lot of sense. I'm sure that the food industry alone has a lot to do with that influence on, without jumping too far down that hole. I'm sure. I mean, hell, I don't care. We can, but I had one quick question for you first. Like, what can people expect when they start to detox from sugar and actually get off it? Like what kind of stories do you hear of people when they quit sugar for 30, 60, 90 days and then they go on to live without really putting any sugar in their diet? Like, what changes for them?
Oh, good question. Yeah. So night sweats is very real. People sweat at night. You're hungry for 30 straight days or more, because your delivery system for heroin is neither. Your delivery system for alcohol is drink, whatever. Yeah. But this is food. And remember I said the limbic brain is hijacked? Literally every system in your body is trying to get re-ingested so they can get this dopamine hit, right? Wow. And so you're hungry all the time, but you're not really hungry. That will pass. You'll come to a point where you're not that hungry, right? And the key part, and this is lore literally in the science of weight loss and everything, is when people lose a bunch of weight, it's usually because they gave up some white stuff, flour, sugar, whatever. They all gain it all back and then some. And so what happens is similar to pause. You're familiar with that? Post-acute withdrawal syndrome. Yeah. It's in drugs and alcohol and everything. Same thing happens in sugar, right? After you're physically off it, and it's not as, I actually personally think in some cases it's just as bad as alcohol withdrawals and just as bad as some other withdrawals from drugs. But I don't need to go there because people do it. But what happens is after day 30 it becomes a mental game, right? It becomes your emotional well-being, your growth. You have to understand, you have to go to yoga, take a walk, call a friend, get a hug. You have to do other emotional recovery things that usually take effort. Getting up off the couch, you can't just reach for sugar. It's changed because you've got to get your dopamine going again. You've got to heal up there. So for the first year, it's a fight, and people have varying degrees of success without support, right? And I hear this all the time. Well, I was down 30 pounds. It was I was 4 months in. And there was a birthday party, and I've been off the wagon for 6 months again, and I'm back. I hear this every single day in my groups. I got 4,500 people in a private group, and every day we have an anniversary, but we also have somebody coming back, right? Oh, yeah. Because it was time to answer your question, which is it takes support, it takes time, it takes understanding, it takes a real recovery.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So there's a lot of different, a lot of diets out there, right? We hear carnivore diet, Atkins, the keto. One question I wanted to kind of have you touch on was the keto flu. So I was kind of interested, is that just sugar withdrawals, or what is the keto flu?
That's exactly right. The keto flu is sugar addiction. It's sugar withdrawals. It's sugar addiction withdrawals. And it's ultra processed carb withdrawals, flour too.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of folks from the keto diet who can do everything but on the diet, but get off sugar. I had a guy, he's a client, he lost 100 pounds on keto, but he had plateaued, and it's been a couple of years, and he had 60 more pounds to lose, and he just kept going back to the sugar. And when we put it all together, it was about a woman. It was about a relationship that he had.
Oh, wow.
That was 10 years old that was not that great, you know? And when he set boundaries and then they finally broke up, he got off the sugar. So it took putting two and two together, which a lot of people don't equate. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's interesting, because that's very similar, or it sounds at least a little bit like a lot of people with addiction issues suffer from trauma or had emotional experiences
100%.
where they never dealt with it. They stuffed it down. They didn't talk about it. They didn't forgive. They didn't, all that stuff. So you're saying that the same type of stuff can happen with sugar?
Oh, believe me.
Yeah,
it's
that is
like
crazy.
Remember we talked about reaching for the sugar when you're stressed or worried or fearful, right? Well, same thing with the, ACEs, the adult, the children experiences, the adverse childhood experiences. It's like old trauma. It's common. I mean, we all know about it in the recovery of alcohol and drugs, that you have to get some closure. You have to feel those feelings out of old trauma that you stuffed down with the alcohol or the drugs. Same thing with sugar. I mean, the numbers in treatment centers are like women who have binge eating disorder, over 50% have some sort of trauma or sexual abuse that they're overcoming,
Wow.
So it's and people don't give it the shrift or give it the respect that it can also tamp it down, it becomes a process addiction as well, because you're always chasing after the food. You're always hiding the food. You're always, whatever. But there also is a psychoactive component that is powerful enough to keep those emotions down. And so when you go into recovery, to go back to your last question, these emotions start to surface. And if you don't have alternative methods, yoga, walking, running, exercise to combat it, then you're there left naked to deal with these emotions, right?
Yeah.
And so you touched on it, man. That's a huge part of recovery from food stuff.
What about substitutes? So, I mean, is there any safe substitutes, especially to help people in the first, 30, 60, 90 days that can help with that versus just, cold turkey, no sugar? What do you recommend? Is there anything out there that people use that's safe and works?
I'm not being sarcastic. I'm
Sure.
really not. I'm trying not to be. It's like people say, "Can I drink beer? Can I give up the whiskey?"
It'd be similar to like a non-alcoholic beer, I guess, right? It's
exactly.
Yeah,
we know. I don't know what your thoughts are on non-alcoholic beer, but it's like the remember back to the dopamine. It's like wired together, fired together. Okay,
Yeah.
It's like the sweet taste is abnormal for us in large volumes all day. Okay. And every snacking event is really not a snacking event. It's an emotional event. Okay. Now that's an important kind of construct, but moreover, to answer the question is when you get the stevia or the whatever, monk fruit, all these health food kind of sweeteners kind of thing, xylitol, whatever, your body doesn't know the difference. It thinks it's the regular, and then your mind starts to go process, especially in the early days. Right.
Yeah.
And what happens is after 90 or so days, anything like that tastes like syrupy sweet. It's like, ugh.
Yeah.
You probably had that too sweet feeling even now, but once you get off it, it's even magnified so much. It's worse. So I suggest in the early days to not do that, and then to readjust your taste buds. And then later, if you want to add, low glycemic, low fructose, we haven't talked much about fructose, but low fructose berries, strawberries, blueberries, that kind of stuff, and see how it works for you, then try it that way. But to try and get away from the sweet for a time. I mean, we're all adults, Shane. If I told you not to eat steak for a month or two, you'd say, I like steak, but you do it, right?
Yeah.
And just because you see how it would work, you would do the experiment, right? Well, people can't seem to do this experiment because of all the things we've been mentioning, right? They can't seem to do it simply because there are other factors at play in their brain and in their behavioral processes.
So it's much more, much deeper than just the sugar. Same with the alcohol. I always tell people, and when I share my own thoughts on my drinking habits and addiction issues, it really wasn't about so much the alcohol. I mean, yeah, that was a piece of it. It continues, that's always going to be a piece of it, but there was so much more to that. That was just a tool I was using to cope with all the other crap that I had never dealt with before.
It takes a little bit to admit that and be transparent about that, even to yourself. So that's the challenge,
Yeah. No, thanks, man. Yeah, that's good. Social events. You said you have one rule, and if you follow this rule, social events can be a little bit easier. So I'll give an example. Let's say we're at a tailgate at the Oakland A's game, which now, right now, see, I wasn't going to say anything. I wanted to keep this timeless, but right now in this moment, MLB has been pushed back and delayed, as of many of the other sports, for the first time in like history, I think. But anyways, beside the point, opening day, we were planning on going tailgating. There'd probably be some barbecue. There'd probably be some cookies. We're at this social event. Like, what's the one thing that we can do if we follow this rule that we can help stay away from that sugar?
Yeah, one of the major components of this is the social piece, because it is so social and everyone's doing it, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, a couple of tricks that I've used, these are tricks. These are actual, you're going to need them.
Yeah.
The best thing is to have a sugar-free buddy with you, but that always helps, or have someone you can get on your phone up to.
Yeah.
But I always say, people say when they offer me something, I say, does that have sugar in it? I can't have sugar, right? And just the actual question or the statement, I can't have sugar. I've done this for 30 years in restaurants and parties and everything all over the world. And people immediately become your advocate. They're like, they think that you have diabetes. You don't, only two people have ever asked, both those waiters had diabetes, right? And so they don't even ask. They say, oh, I don't know. And they really start to help you. They become an advocate for you. Yeah. And you don't have to say anything more. You don't have to go into detail. You don't have, one of the things you can't do, I would not do, especially at a tailgate party, is to start a discussion about it, right? Because it always ends badly. Totally. It always ends badly in the early days when you're not really strong, right? Yeah. It might end up with you using the product or whatever.
Yeah.
So I would just suggest that there's simple. A little stealthness in the early days. Hopefully that'll answer it. But and also more importantly, that there's somebody on the phone you can step away from the party and just say, man, these guys are pounding this stuff and I can't take it anymore. And I say, I understand it. Just those three I understands will help you go back to the party. So that's important too.
Good stuff. So even maybe, what about this? Like, can you say something like, I'm cutting out sugar for 30 days. I want to see how I feel, or something. I mean, is they make it a contest, or is that, what do you think?
There's a couple tricks. And one of them is that's a good one, actually.
Yeah.
Another one is, that's not my food, or something like that. Or I can't eat that, or I don't eat that. I can't remember which one it is, but yeah, I mean, it's like, there are language tricks that work too.
Yeah.
Where you're reinforcing yourself and putting, you're setting a boundary. Right?
What about if someone says, why don't you eat sugar? And you go, because I'm better than you. How about
that? Because I'm sweet enough, man. I'm sweet enough.
Someone asked me that and I said it as a joke. Well, why don't you drink? Because I'm better than you. I'm kidding, man. No. Okay. So this was the big question that kind of got me. One of the ones I wanted to touch on a little bit with you. I have two kids, right? And I already mentioned kind of how I grew up. A lot of soda, a lot of sweets. Loved it as a kid, of course, but obviously led to other things in my life, addiction, and even today, a struggle with sugar myself. I would like to say that we haven't followed in the same footsteps as that. I think I'm a little more aware of it. But unfortunately, sugar is probably a pretty big part of our kids' diets and a lot of, snacks and little, of course, burnt cakes. I mean, all that kind of stuff, right? Especially with my son. So for those who have children out there, like myself, And we'd like to at least start to be very mindful about this and start to make some changes, start consciously thinking about it. How do we raise children in a no sugar or very minimal sugar type of environment when it's all around us?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I it's become a passion. We started a little Facebook group and it's just exploded. People are very interested in this. And it's like, I did raise a couple of sugar-free kids. And to answer to your question, it has to be broken into two parts, okay? Simply because from the womb till 4 or 5 years old, we have 100% control of what our children eat.
Sure.
Very rarely do we leave them alone, or if they have to go to daycare, or there's a way to handle that too. But I just believe that first 1,000 days is so important in brain development. Now science has proven it out. I interviewed a guy for our summit. He said, this entire book, he's a doctor. He's been on Dr. Drew and everything. It's entirely based on the shrinkage of the brain, the sugar, right? And so the brain science is now, it's not 100%, but you're just giving that child that leg up in the world, so, and there's no reason, there's no like social reason, there's no other reason not to have them sugar-free, like the American, the study we talked about, or the announcement we talked about. And so that's one thing, but the most part, which is another 95% of population yet, is that when they've already had it, they already have had sugar, they're experienced with it, they know what it is, they crave it, they want it, they want to be inclusive in their birthday parties and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to throw you a little curveball, my friend, is that it's like the airlines, you got to put your oxygen mask on first. Like my beautiful, loving, sweet mother, she told us not to eat too much sugar, but she always had a stash, and she was, we knew where it was and we knew exactly how much was in it, how much we could steal and not, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, so at the end of the day, between 5 and 11 or 12, they just want to be like you. They, I have a coach, she was, her mother owns a bakery still, right? So the child's grandmother owns a bakery, and the grandmother will not have any of the sugar-free stuff, but she went through our program. She became one of our coaches, and her daughter is 9. Okay. And she started the process by doing it herself first, and then starting to talk honestly, openly, and transparently about it. And now we have a 9-year-old sugar freedom addict, because when she goes to a birthday party, they don't have it much at home. She comes back and she has a tummy ache, and she says, "Mommy, I have a tummy ache." And it's like, well, it was probably because of the sugar, because she was not experienced with it anymore. Right. So it is a longer process, and it does take some hard conversations, probably some crying, you've all seen the kid in the grocery cart trying to get to the candy, right? Screaming at the top of his lungs, right? He doesn't even have words yet, Shane. He can't say, "Mommy, I want candy," but he knows he wants that candy. He knows what it is, but he can't even articulate it. So that would be a clue. But anyway, I think it's worth doing. It's probably going to be what I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing, trying to educate people that this may be something that they want. I mean, I wanted to tell the parents out there, if they feel like they're suffering, if weight has been an issue, if some of these topics that you and I have talked about resonate, then don't do it to the kids. I mean, you have control of that food supply. They can't go buy food before they're 12 or 13. And most allowances, I thought back on this when I was a kid. I never got enough money to do anything. I never got enough money to get anything. I would have had to save, and I wasn't that good at that. And so all of my allowance, quote unquote, went to candy, right? So,
ice cream man. The ice cream man's coming.
Right, the ice cream man.
I'm chasing him down.
Again, another soapbox, Ron. I don't mean to be that way, but there's the pain that I see day in and day out. Has just changed me a little bit, and it made me more of an advocate.
Well, I appreciate it, because I think it's honesty, and sometimes being honest is tough. I love the analogy of the oxygen mask. I think that's great. And when you said that, it made me think, so my son, his name's Cash, he's 5. And you're so right, man. He looks up to to me, man. I'm his idol, and I there's nothing more in this world that I love more than that, man. He's my best buddy, man. We call each other, "Oh, you're my best buddy. You're my best buddy, Dad." It's great, man. So what I was thinking though was when we go to the gym, right? Like it's a couple weeks back. I shared this a couple episodes ago, and I did a podcast actually, and I can't remember if it was titled "Monkey See, Monkey Do." That was something that came up, but that old saying, right? Monkey see, monkey do. And so we're at the gym, and we're swinging kettlebells, right? And I look over, there's a kids area that's close by, and I look over and Cash is doing the same thing, man. He's swinging kettlebells. He's trying to do the same thing we're all doing. He's running around, and I'm just cracking up. I'm like, yeah, man, and I'll come home and he'll be in here working out, I'm trying to get buff, Dad, so he sees like the way that I live my life, working out, going to the gym religiously, trying to get it in as much as I can. Well, he also sees Dad eating ice cream and sneaking a cherry pie and eating a couple cookies one night. Oh yeah, hey bud, let's go grab an ice cream or whatever. And I think to some extent, okay, I don't know, if there's a safe area in that, I don't know. But what I do know is that he sees that shit and it's so good. I'm glad this is kind of coming to my attention that he's gonna do what he sees. And so maybe if I can start I'm going to take it one step at a time, maybe slowly try to start cutting that out, at least, being more aware of it, that can help. So good stuff, man. I appreciate it.
No, the awareness is key. You start I think there's a saying, meetings screw up your drinking, but this is awareness, and this is the same thing.
Yeah.
Even when, if you go back, it's just not the same after you have the awareness,
Yeah. Yeah. That's good, man. Yeah. Meetings screw up your drinking. At our club here, the Alano Club, it's funny because the wall, the back of the wall where the person secretaries or chairs the meeting, the other side of that wall is a bar. So you can hear the irony in this, like, you have a choice walking up. You can go into the bar or you can go into a meeting. And man, I'm glad I go into meetings much more, that's for sure. But anything else we missed, Mike? I mean, anything else you want to touch on, or any last minute advice or thoughts? Where can people find you at? All that good stuff.
Yeah, they can find me at sugaraddiction.com. There's a free book there. It's on Amazon too, but you can go to the site and download it. Free, sugaraddiction.com. You see a big yellow book there, The Last Resort Sugar Detox. And
nice.
Kind of tell my story a little more of my kids and all that kind of stuff, and my getting off the stuff. And I talk a little bit about getting sober, but I'm working on another book on that, but that's free. But one thing I did want to tell you, and you and I talked about it early on about your pioneering work in the sobriety podcast stuff. What I found is that folks that succeed, now this is like early adopters in the tech space, right? You're up there in that world. Early adopters in the tech space, people who get off, people that have had success with us, people that had success, period, in some way, shape, or form are pioneers, right? They're not afraid to go against societal stuff, right? Yeah. They've done well in athletics, or they've done well in their career, or in school, or some other. They're a great knitter. In their family, they're a pioneer, right? And so these newer folks, these pioneer type folks, they'll get their own information. They'll do their own research. They'll search out their own new tribe. And not that they're going to leave their family or their old tribe, but they're going to know some new people, and they're willing to do that. That's just anecdotal at some level for me, but I see it all the time. I see it all the time. So don't be afraid of society's view of this now. Just like years ago when recovery advocacy was just starting. Same thing here. People are going to need, you're going to look like a genius. This is the right side of history, Shane.
Yeah,
people,
that's good.
So science is going to be able to tell you quantitatively in a decade why it's bad for you, and the world changes on something called continuous glucose monitors, which is put it on, or it's non-invasive on a Fitbit, where you can watch your blood sugar all day, and you'll know when you eat that cherry pie, that thing goes crazy.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So there's a lot coming, and don't be afraid to be an early adopter, I guess the best way to put it.
I'm gonna start thinking about the cherry pie funeral. I'm gonna start planning that. We're gonna have a ceremony. We may bury a box of cherry pies underneath in a cache somewhere. That I might have to cement it with concrete so I can't get into it in a moment's notice.
I love it. No, well, man, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, I'm sure you know this, and I'm not going to be blowing smoke up here, whatever, but you could sway a lot of people if you were to out loud live this attempt to go sugar-free.
Yeah, that's good.
You really could, I'm
going to give it a shot. I might have to lean on you and holler at you, a little bit
here,
and say, hey, man.
I sponsored 100 people getting off drugs and alcohol. This has been more fun than all that put together.
Really? Yeah, that's great, man. That's great. Well, Mike, man, I appreciate you out there listening. Find Mike again at sugaraddiction.com. He has a great Facebook group that you can join, and it's facebook.com/quitsugarnow. What about your Instagram handle, Mike, and Twitter?
It's this crazy story. I don't know if you know this, but Facebook doesn't like the term addiction. They don't like any malady. Diabetes, you can't use any malady. So literally, they've been throttling me. So my Instagram and all those handles are now moved to Sugar-Free Man.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Sugar-Free Man. Okay, cool. And guys listening, we'll put all these links. They're in the show notes. So you can just go into the show notes and click on it. You can find the download of the book, all that stuff on there. Mike Collins, man, thanks again, brother. It's good to meet you. Really good to help get some education about this. And thanks for all you do, man. You're helping a lot of people. And you obviously helped me today. And hopefully those out there listening got some good stuff out of this too. So thank you again.
Well, thank you. And keep up the great work. And thanks for your openness and honestness. It helps folks. I know it does.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Be sure to check us out at thatsoberguy.com. Connect with us on Instagram at realthatsoberguy, on Twitter at Shane Raymer. Thanks to Promises. Thanks to Clean Cause. Check out transitionsdaily.org too if you're looking for a daily 12-step email. Peace, love, and respect. Keep your blood clean.
To keep my head on straight. You still say that I don't know anything about you. Oh, I don't know anything about you, but I know what you do in the